Hello, and welcome. Silrace here about immersion and immersive, and ranting on about the two for a bit, because immersion and immersive, those two words are now being used for all sorts of things. For example, I keep coming across Fallout 4 and, Skyrim mods, which are like immersive this and that. Then I just check it out and like, oh, this actually doesn't really have much to do with immersion or immersive. So yeah. First things to understand is that realism and immersion are not the same thing. They do not need to go hand in hand. You can get immersed in a fantasy world which is not realistic. You can get immersed in a video game after all. For example, if you make mod which adds hunger and eating, drinking and sleeping into Skyrim, that is realistic, kind of, for the game, but it doesn't mean that it's immersive by itself. That realism can add to the immersion for some people, but I hope you understand the distinction. So just because somebody does not use that mod does not mean they are any less immersed into the game, because there are different degrees of immersion and people get immersed into different things in different ways. Let's throw in a couple examples here. Let's say you are watching Lord of the Rings. That's a good example. You see Gandalf. So the big question is, do you see Gandalf as the character he is, representing, the Gandalf? Or do you see a dude in a costume? This is where the big distinction between immersion is. Whenever you watch a movie, there are going to be parts of the movie where you are more immersed in it. There is a character on screen you absolutely love and you really care about. And suddenly there are these other characters you really don't give a damn about. And suddenly you are less immersed in the movie. And this keeps bouncing back and forth within a movie or a TV series, whatever you are watching. That's just how it goes. That's how immersion works. You can be less immersed, you can be more immersed. And usually immersion happens because you have an emotional connection to something or somebody in that particular movie or a game or whatever. For example, did you hate Joffrey during season 1 in Game of Thrones? Then congratulations, you were immersed, because you had this hatred for this particular character. Strong emotional connection. It doesn't have to be somebody you really care, it just could be somebody you really dislike, like very well played character in the series or movie. In video games, you are usually playing a single character, and you are instantly immersed in certain fashion because you have, if nothing else, you have vested interest in not having your character die, right? If nothing else, when the death occurs in something like Fallout or something like Skyrim, you will have to redo whatever you were doing because, you go back to your previous save game. And so you are immersed in the character. With the same thing said, I would argue here that it's no less immersive to play the character from third-person view than first-person view. For some people, the first-person view helps the immersion, right? You're like looking through your own character's eyes. For somebody else, playing from third-person view feels more immersive because it's like feeling like, okay, I am telling the story of this character, For me, as somebody who has watched quite a bit of movies and other things, but also played a lot of video games and gotten used to picking up tiny minor details from things, immersion breakers happen often in movies, and this is a very good example of what causes the real distinction between immersive and not immersive. When you see the technical stuff, the mechanics used to create the situation, that's not immersive. I'll do a video game comparison in just a sec. First I'll talk about movies because this is a very easy to do in a movie scene about talking about immersion. Aliens, the second Alien movie, at the end, when Ripley falls into the pit with the cargo hauler, the emergency light on top of the cargo hauler breaks. In the next scene, the light is magically fixed. That breaks immersion to me. I'm like, okay, I know they didn't, do this properly. That pulls me out of being immersed in the movie, right? Another thing, Lord of the Rings, when folks enter Moria and you can see the electricity cable going into Gandalf's staff. In what the heck is the series 24? That was the series when Nina Myers makes a phone call to Tony from the abandoned little house on the outskirts. You can see for a brief moment, you can clearly see the second cameraman, like on the screen. That pulls me out of the immersion. Video games do this sort of stuff by, for example, where it constantly or consistently breaks immersion, many games, by throwing the user interface in your face. It's clearly game mechanics. It has nothing to do with the world itself or anything else. It's the game mechanics. For example, you have a health bar or a health number, which tells you how healthy your character is. Instead of having that health bar or health number, if you wanted to do immersion, if you wanted to talk immersion, you would remove that and the character's health would be represented by audio cues and visual cues on your screen. Screen blurring and blood splotches on the screen, for example, and your character crying out in pain. Then you wouldn't know, do I have 5 health or do I have 15 health? Doesn't matter because I'm about to freaking die and that my screen is telling me that, right? That's immersion. Health number, health bar, that's not immersion. Do you understand the difference now? Things like, for example, in Fallout 4, when you loot a legendary item from a legendary creature, time stops entirely, nothing moves. This breaks immersion, obviously, because something which is clearly a game mechanic happens and stops the whole thing from doing anything. Kind of like when you open your Pip-Boy in Fallout 4 and the world stops moving. Like nothing happens around you as long as you are in your Pip-Boy. You could very easily argue that's immersion breaking. Obviously it is. Why do I have the power to stop time? So yeah. I hope this clarified a little bit of what's immersive, not what's immersion. And what's, the other stuff. For example, realism. You don't have to have a realistic game to have an immersive game. You just have to have a game where people can relate and where people can care about what is happening. That's immersion. And you don't have to roleplay either to create immersion. Granted, for example, the best actors, actresses will be able to immerse themselves in the character, but you don't have to be immersed in a character to roleplay that character. I should know I have played how many decades of pen and paper RPGs by now. Mostly as the game master. But anyway, you get the point hopefully by now. Immersion is your emotional connections, your care of things going on your screen or whatever have you. And realism can add to it, but doesn't necessarily have to. It doesn't have to be realistic. Or it doesn't have to be lore friendly either for you to be immersed in it, as is shown very much by various Skyrim mods. And that's about that. I think I'm done ranting. I don't want to drag this on too much anymore. We're almost 10 minutes in. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, for listening. Hopefully this was educational to somebody somewhere. Maybe we see a little less, immersion and immersive used a little less wrong in the future. Thank you very much for watching and listening.